Chip, look, in terms of Mariupol, is it looking increasingly like its time has now come?
Well, the last time we spoke on that was day 58. It's now day 72. Putin declared victory on day 58 and not a fly would get out of there. So it's always premature in terms of the fighting capacity of Ukraine and a lot of the stalled operations. I think it will fall, and Putin will probably declare a victory anyway ahead of the 9th of May Victory Day, so that he's got something to sell on that day. That is, that he has raised up and gathered in the Russian people. He's prioritized those in the Donbass and the Crimea. He's enlarged his territory, and he's got that land corridor which Mariupol represents. That's its significance.
Obviously, he will spin it the way he wants to look like an amazing triumph or victory, but it's not compared with what he would have wanted to achieve, is it?
No, I don't think it is. I mean, I think it can be actually spun the other way. It is a powerful symbol of Ukrainian resistance, and it shows you can counterpoise that against the Russians actually abandoning ship on the Moskva. So it's really just shows the Russians' ability to reach out and destroy rather than their ability to capture and then hold and govern. And that is their dilemma for the future, even though they might be successful in the Donbass and along that corridor to Crimea. They will always have a flank which is open, and that gives them a great difficulty for the future.
What are we to make of the comments from Lukashenko in Belarus? Because it does sound a little bit like he's starting to break ranks.
Yeah, it does. You don't want to be associated with defeat. And of course, originally, this was the thunder run to Kyiv, which would knock the political polity over by D+3. And in early March, we had two conditions which were given to Zelensky by the Prime Minister of Israel, which were a total victory for the Russians and unconditional surrender. They've rowed back from that to go for the things that they've had since really D+11 on the 10th of March, which is that Ukraine should not join any international organizations, by which they mean NATO and Ukraine, and that they must recognize the independence of Crimea and the secession of the Donbass. Now, I think one of the things which is an option for Putin on the Victory Day on the 9th of May is to actually declare that the Donbass are annexed. That would probably be popular at home, and he needs to be popular at home. I don't think he will mobilize. That also is one of his options, but that has both military, political and societal risks attached to it. Everyone in the major cities who have avoided this war in terms of being conscripted would then be part of it, and it would come home to people in the way that the propaganda machine and the boys who are dying from the sort of rural areas we've not seen in sort of elite Russian society.
If Putin does make that sort of announcement on May 9 and claims it as some sort of a victory, or as you says, actually announces that those areas are annexed now, what will NATO's reaction be, or will we simply not do anything?
Well, we look at things in four ways. We call it the DIME paradigm. That's diplomatic, information, military and economic. So what we will do is it will isolate him further diplomatically. It would probably lead to further sanctions. So both ends of the DIME, the D and the E, he would be in trouble. That would make him even more of an international pariah worry to annex it, because the annexation of Crimea in 2014 has never been signed up to anyone. The situation has changed now. People would take more and more measures if he were to do that.
I mean, it's a very odd situation at the moment, isn't it? It's very difficult still, after all this time, to work out what actually is going to satisfy Putin, whether he will at any point sort of take a step back and say, right, I'm going to have to call it quits now. I can claim a sort of semi-victory and I'm going to leave it at that. We just don't know, do we?
No, but we know, obviously, why fighting stops and why fighting doesn't stop. And fighting stops either because you have a military victory, and Mariupol isn't that victory, or because the improbability of military victory. It also doesn't stop because you haven't had the sacrifices that you want, and you need a desire for an outcome which satisfies the leaders at the top of an organization. So he needs a sufficient victory to justify the cost and the sacrifice already made. I think he has already rowed back. It's got to be the Donbass, Crimea, and that land corridor in between. One of the maverick things he could do is actually go for a unilateral ceasefire if he were to do that and say, right, we've done that, now negotiate. That is one thing where he might fragment the international coalition in terms of the sanction regime against him.
Meanwhile, I think we are also amazed, impressed and staggered at the resilience of the Ukrainian people. We've been, over the last couple of days, still seen civilians coming out of that hellhole inside the steelworks. We gather there are 200 more probably currently hiding in bunkers. Isn't it absolutely astonishing, the strength of the human spirit there?
No, it absolutely is. And that's why I said earlier on about this can absolutely be spun by the Russians, both in terms of the military resistance and the civilian resilience that we've seen. You're absolutely right there, Anne. And that's why it will become a sort of heroic part, I think, of Ukrainian history in the future. So war really has two parts. It has a physical part and then there's a psychological part. And on the psychological part, I think the Ukrainians have shown themselves to be absolutely first class in the way that the Russians haven't so far.
And as a fighting force as well.
Oh. Yeah, there's one of the things that miscalculations by Putin was that Ukraine didn't exist as a nation. And it's not armies that fight wars, it's nations that fight wars. So they underestimated the Ukrainians as a nation. And that plays into, again, one of the things that Russia may have to do. And that is one of the options on the map, is this general mobilization where Russia fights the war. But as I said, that has massive military, social and political implications for Putin should he do that.
What do we know so far as well of the Russian fighting forces? We hear very little about the way they are coping. Do you know?
Well, what we do know is that the key battleground really in the Donbass, that the operation there is stalled. What they wanted to do in phase 2 is to do an operational level maneuver, that is the level above tactics. And that involves either an envelopment or an encirclement or what we call a turning movement. They have neither the expertise nor the manpower to do that. They've not got the forces massed to achieve that. But taking Mariupol does free up 12 battalion tactical groups. They are not in a state at the moment to be the southern sort of part of that shoulder coming up from the south, but that is what they would want. But they still have no sustainability. They've got logistic issues, and that is why the Ukrainians are recovering ground around Izium. So there's a long fight to go in this, and we're still a long way from the point where the Ukrainians are able to take widespread offensive operations. They are doing local counterattacks very successfully, but again, not at the tactical level, not at the operational level.